Hello, my name is Tim Shoebridge. Welcome to this video. Today I'm taking a look at this synthesizer here, the Roland Jupiter XM. Now, before we get started with this video, I just want to sort of like cover the reasons why I've got the Jupiter XM here and why I'm doing this video at all. I have to admit that when this synth was first announced, as well as the Jupiter X, and then when it was released and people started doing their videos on it, I have to say, in all honesty, I wasn't at all interested in it. And that's really because Roland are pitching this synthesizer as being a sort of like a faithful recreation of some of their vintage synthesizers. If I just check their website, what does it say? It says it faithfully recreates sought after instruments from our long history of genre-defining sounds. Well, in all honesty, I'm not interested in recreating the sound of a Jupiter 8 or an SH-101 or anything like that. I'm interested in making good sounds, but I'm not interested in specifically emulating anything. And for that reason alone, I really was kind of turned off of this and I didn't pay it much attention. However, it was a few weeks ago when I was doing a video on the Waldorf Kyra, and I was starting to think, well, what is the competition out there for the Kyra? What are the synthesizers are out there that can compete, that are the similar alternatives to the Kyra? And that got me starting to think about this Jupiter XM in a different way. And the reason why I say that is because the Kyra is an all-digital, multi-timbral, high polyphony, subtractive synthesizer, a virtual analog, of course. This Jupiter XM, if we ignore the sort of the analog vintage recreation modeling that's going on inside it, it is an all-digital virtual analog subtractive synthesizer with a high polyphony, and it's also multi-timbral. And what I'm really realizing now I've got it is how much of a alternative to the Kyra this Jupiter XM really is. So that's where I'm coming from in this video. I'm going to be looking at this synthesizer not as an emulation of vintage gear at all. I'm going to be looking at it as a general purpose multi-timbral all digital synthesizer that could fit into your studio, or in fact you could take it anywhere because it is completely portable and it can run on batteries. So that's what I'm going to be doing. This is not a full review of the synthesizer at all. It's certainly not going to in any way, shape or form help you use this synthesizer. There's no tutorial aspects at all. That's way beyond the scope of this video. I'm really going to be just picking on a few things about this synth which I think are interesting, I think are worth mentioning, and it's really about my thoughts on it and nothing more than that. So that's what's coming up in this video. I really do hope you enjoy it. Thanks very, very much for watching. Right, so before we get hands-on with the Jupiter XM itself, I think it's important just to run through just a few basics about the synth architecture in here, because for me it's really quite unique. It's quite a Roland thing. Now, you know, I know this might be going back to the classroom a bit, no hands-on, no sound, so if you're bored with this section, please just skip through it. But I do think it's important, you know, if you're really interested in the synth, interested in maybe buying it, that you understand its capabilities, and that comes down to the architecture of the synth engine inside it. Now, it's a multi-timbral synthesizer, and like all multi-timbral synthesizers, what that basically means is you have the concept of a multi, which is a patch that you create, which you can save as presets, and that patch contains one or more parts, and it's those parts that are effectively synth voices. Each part is going to have oscillators, filters, envelopes, LFOs, modulation capability going on inside it. Totally different sounds, and you can put those sounds together inside your multi, either build them up as layers to create sort of like rich, full sounds, or you can split them across the keyboard. So maybe you have a bass sound down the bottom of the keyboard and play chords or leads at the top. So that's all, very, very standard stuff. And on the face of it, the Jupiter XM looks pretty damn standard. There's a change in terminology. They don't call a multi, they call it a scene. And in terms of the parts themselves, when you save those actual sounds as presets, they call them tones. So that's the only real sort of like difference so far, is we have scenes and tones. I'm just going to show you some graphics now to try and help illustrate what I'm talking about, because it will get a little bit more complicated. It's easy if you see diagrams. So here is our Roland Jupiter XM scene, and it's got 5 parts in it. They advertise this synth as being a 5-part multi-timbral synth, and it is in some ways, although it's restricted. Part number 5 is restricted to being a drum track only. It'll only play drum kits. So, from my point of view, in terms of general synthesis and being able to play it via MIDI, notes on a keyboard, it's a 4-part multi-synthesizer, which isn't really, great. It sounds quite limited, but actually it's not, as we'll get into. Now, so far, so good, all very standard stuff. But what is a part in terms of synth architecture? That's where things start to get a little bit complicated, and I'm going to use the word, or the phrase, a little bit complicated quite a lot in this video, because there's a lot of complexity in this little synthesizer, I have to say. So what is a part? Well, what a part is depends on the synth model that you assign to it. So we've got these 6 wonderful synth models. The RD piano, the XV5080, and then we've got some lovely vintage recreations, Jupiter 8, Juno, etc. Here I'm attempting to show you in this graphic what a part can be, or what it can contain. It can either contain 2 oscillators, or it can contain 4 oscillators, or it can contain no oscillators at all, but things called partials. And if it has partials, it's going to have 4 of them. And as I said, what you end up with in terms of oscillators, 2 or 4 or partials, is dependent on the synth model that you apply to your part. And, to add extra complexity, you don't actually have to apply a synth engine to your part at all. And if you don't apply a synth engine to your part, then what you're using is the underlying synth engine that's in the synthesizer, called the Zen Core engine. And it's the most complex and feature-rich engine, and these models basically, if you like, sit on top of that and give you a sort of a different view on top of that synth engine. So if you don't apply a synth model to your part, then you're using the engine directly, and you're getting access to all of its power, basically. So which models give you which variation of a part? This is what I'm attempting to show you that. If you've chosen the Jupiter 8 or the JX8P model, then you'll get 2 oscillators. If you choose the Juno 106 or the SH101, then you'll get 4 oscillators. And if you choose the XV5080 or the RD, I think it's an RD700. I read somewhere that it was an RD700, but RD. Or you don't actually apply a synth model at all, which means you're using the underlying Zen Core engine, then you'll get your 4 partials. Now, it might look a bit odd that a Juno 106 has 4 oscillators, but what we're really talking about here is sort of waveform generators, if you like, because we've got our square wave, we've got a sawtooth, we've got a sub-oscillator, and we've got a noise source. So that's where those 4 oscillators are coming from in this synth architecture here. So the last thing I really want to cover and try and explain is, as easy as I can, is, well, what's the difference between a part that's got oscillators and a part that's got partials? What are these partials? If we look at this graphic here, and we look at the moment just on the left-hand side at the Jupiter 8 part. So if I assign the Jupiter 8 model to a part, then it has its 2 oscillators. And also it'll have a low pass filter, high pass filter, 2 envelopes, and an LFO. So it's really a self-contained synth voice, and you know, it's very traditional to have a part that is a self-contained voice like this. You know, you'll get something very similar on the Waldorf Kyra or on an Axis Virus or any other multi-timbral synthesizer. It's a self-contained synth voice. But if we look at the right-hand side now, this is a part with the XV5080 model applied to it. It's got 4 partials, and it's the partials themselves that will contain some kind of waveform generator, a filter, a pitch envelope, a filter envelope, an amplitude envelope, and 2 LFOs. It's the partial itself that is the little self-contained synth voice, and you have 4 of them in one part. So really what we're doing there on the right hand side is actually sort of like modeling a 4-part multi-timbral synth inside a single part. Now the waveform in one of these partials, it can be a digitally generated waveform, you know, sine wave, triangle, square, etc. Or it can be a PCM sample. In fact, it can be 2 samples to create a stereo effect, one for the left channel, one for the right channel. So it's only if you have a part that has partials can you play PCM samples in it. But you have 4 synth voices in your part, and that's really, really powerful, because if you think about it, we have one scene, 4 parts, and if each of those parts has 4 partials, then there are 16 partials in total. Now remember, those partials are individual synth voices, completely separate, unique waveforms, samples, LFOs, envelopes, filter settings, etc. And you've got 16 of them. It's like having a 16-part multi-timbral synth here, but not quite. So that's the power of this little synthesizer. There's an awful lot in it, yet the user interface, you know, the front panel controls are really, really very, very simple. So, you know, something's got to give here. It's a bit of a compromise. You've got a nice clean panel on the front, but a very complex synth engine lying underneath it. And I will try and sort of like show you little glimpses of what's going on in the next section. I'm going to show you a few scenes that I put together on this synthesizer, and I'll show you sort of like how you access them and how they're made up. So that's what's coming up next. Okay, so here's a very, very quick example of a scene I've put together. It's got 3 parts in it. That's what these lit buttons indicate. I'm just going to listen to the first one. It's called Dark Vox. It's a factory preset. All these are factory presets. Here's the second one. Now I've panned these parts just a little bit left and right. And I've set the levels so they mix the way I want them to. Here's the third one. It's a little bit more of an in-your-face choir sound. So what I've done with this particular scene is I've programmed one of the sliders. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see that there are some performance controls, 2 sliders and 3 buttons. So I've programmed this SL1, and in the menu you'll see here under an assign section that SL1 is set to level of P3, so it is controlling the level of the 3rd part. So you can do this kind of expression pedal kind of thing. In many ways, the Jupiter XM reminds me of the Korg Wave State. They both come packed with hundreds and hundreds of factory preset sounds, and I think you could really spend a lifetime just building scenes out of the factory tones that Roland provide. There are literally thousands of them. It's been very, very rare that I've found the need to actually create my own tone. There's just so many to choose from. And behind those thousands of factory presets, there are literally thousands of samples. When we get on to creating a scene from scratch, I'll show you how to choose those samples from the preset library. Okay, so here's another quick example of using those performance sliders. This scene has got 4 parts. Let's just listen to them individually. First one is an orchestra string sound. Similar for the second. Third one is some horns, very mellow. And the fourth is woodwind. So we'll combine all of those together, but the first slider is going to control the level of the second part, and the second slider is going to control the level of the third part. Okay, I can't resist just one more example of some orchestral sounds, because some of them sound really, really nice. Here is a scene I've got 4 orchestral sounds in, 3 string parts and an oboe. I'll just add them in one at a time. So here's the first on its own. Simple violin. Let's add in some ensemble strings and the oboe. Okay, so another way I like to combine parts into a scene is to create a lead sound, whether it's a guitar or a piano or something, and combine it with a nice gentle pad sound in the background. So here is a patch, a scene where we've got just 2 parts to it. This is the first. Really nice electric piano. So add a bit of reverb. And this is the pad. Okay, so let's try building a scene from scratch using these factory preset tones. First thing I'm going to do is find an empty slot for my scene. Switching to the part, and it's got one part already enabled by default. So I'm going to choose a preset tone by category, and I'm going to look at the acoustic guitars for this example. Okay, so here press enter and we come up with a list. So I'm looking for a nice, simple, mellow guitar. This is lovely, but I'm looking for something a little bit more simple than that. That'll sound nice with some reverb. I'm just going to add a little bit more to the reverb. So I'm going to the reverb page and increase the time a little bit. Okay, so that's just my first part. Now let's look at a second part. So again, go up to the categories and choose a different category. It's a shame these categories aren't in alphabetical order. I have to say, they're in some sort of random order. So I'm thinking of a sort of a string ensemble sound in the background. There are just so many presets to choose from. It's mind-blowing. I'm going to try this particular one. It's quite slow and gentle. Doesn't really go. What I'm going to do is just adjust the levels, turn down the strings basically. So I like the guitar at the lower octaves and the string at the higher octaves, so I'm just going to adjust the guitar part and shift it down one octave. Doesn't really go, it's kind of sort of like not gelling with the guitar, so I'm going to choose something else as my pad sound. I'm going to try a different category here. Let's try these choir sounds. That's nice. Nice harmonics. It's nice. So let's just write it away, go to the right menu, and you'll see that the tones themselves, I haven't changed them in any way. I'm just saving the scene that refers to them. So give them a meaningful name, and job done. Okay, so it's all great so far. It sounds absolutely gorgeous. The samples are fantastic quality. There's an awful lot of them, thousands of them quite literally. They are fantastic quality. There's a load of really, really good material. You don't really need to make your own tones. There's so many to choose from. So, you know, on the face of it so far, it's all fantastic. Sounds great. Easy to put together scenes out of factory tones, no problem at all. However, when you want to start fiddling around and changing things, maybe you've got a factory tone and you just want to sort of like turn down the filter cutoff or something like that. That's when you start to interact with the synth. Obviously, if you are panning things left and right or doing anything like that, you're interacting with the menus, and that's when, you know, it starts to get a little bit tricky. It can be complicated. I'm just going to show you now a little section which I recorded separately, which is basically just going through some of the sources of confusion that I've sort of like found as I've been using the synthesizer. It's quite a sort of like a quick fire little section of sources of confusion. I'm using a different mic, so it sounds a little bit different, so apologies for that. But this hopefully will give you a glimpse into, you know, some of the complexities that you have using the interface of the synthesizer. First area of confusion, the buttons along the bottom. Here, I'm selecting a scene. Here, I'm selecting a part. Here, I'm turning parts on and off. Here, I'm selecting the tone for a part. but actually I'm also selecting the synth model if I choose one of these. But if I choose one of these, I'm not selecting the synth model, but I kind of am, depending on what I pick. Here I'm selecting an oscillator, or I'm selecting a partial. Not exactly obvious what it is, although partials can be turned on and off, but oscillators can't. Here's an example of oscillators. These are oscillators, you can't turn them on and off. But talking of oscillators, I've selected oscillator number 1, and this changes its waveform, and this changes its level. But sometimes you can't do that. It all depends on the synth model that you've chosen. For example, this one here, when I go to the oscillators, of which I have 4, this doesn't do anything, and this doesn't change its level, it just turns it on or off. Another area of confusion. Here I've got a scene and I've got 2 parts that are active. Let's isolate them one at a time and listen to them. That's the first one. That's the second one. But when I introduce the first one, the second one goes silent. Here it is. Where's it gone? The answer is that this slider is being used to fade between them, and this slider works differently when they're both selected as opposed to when only one is selected. Other simple areas of confusion are that here we're dealing with 5 parts, numbered 1 to 5, but these buttons also relate to those 5 parts, numbered 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So here I'm listening to part number 1 with button number 6. Here I'm listening to part number 2 with button number 7. When you're editing parts, you want to isolate them and listen to them on their own, but you've also got to remember you've got to edit the right one, because if you don't edit the right one, you'll be editing the wrong one, but you won't hear it. Okay, I've saved the best till last. This is my biggest source of confusion, and my source of confusion is, what do these controls actually control at any point in time while you're using and editing the sounds on this synthesizer? It's an interesting question. Here I'm just going to choose a scene. It's an XV5080 scene. We've got a sound up there, another sound down there, so we've got a split. I'm going to turn this cutoff knob. Now, what would we expect it to affect if we just select a scene and then turn it? Well, it's not affecting this sound at all. What about this one? Yeah, it's affecting this one on its own. Now, why is that? We have to go into part sort of edit mode in order to figure that one out. We've got 2 part lights lit, so we've got the part number 1 and part number 2 are in use. Let's just solo them so we can hear what they are. That's part number 1, and this is part number 2. And we have here part number 1 selected for editing, which is why turning this cutoff will affect it. Even if we're not in part edit mode and we're looking at something else, still this control only affects the selected part, which you don't know until you go into here. I guess that's logical, that it's always affecting the selected part. Well, let's select part number 2, and just to make sure. Yeah, it's affecting that sound, and not that sound. We can select more than one part at a time by holding them down, so we could select both of them, and now the cutoff control is affecting them both. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's just select this second part and make sure we're editing it. And it's an XV5080 synth model, so it's going to have partials. So let's hit the function button and look at the partials. There are 4 of them. I'm just going to solo them so you can hear what they are. First partial, very, very quiet wind sound. Second one. Third one. And the fourth one. Okay, so let's turn them all on. Now that we're in partial edit mode, we've got the function light on and we're looking at the partials, what would we expect the cutoff control to affect? I would expect it to affect the selected partial, and we've got partial number 1 selected at the moment, and because it's such a quiet sound, I would expect turning this to make hardly any difference to the sound overall. Unfortunately, it's affecting all of the partials, because it turns out that it's not what is selected here that's important, it's what the menu is showing you. So we have to actually go through the menu all the way towards the end where we get to this tone edit partial menu, and we can actually go through each of the partials in turn, partial 4, 3, 2 and 1. If we're in any of these menu pages, now we are going to be, by turning that cutoff, affecting the selected partial that's in the menu. However, be aware that once you move through those menus, it comes out of partial edit mode, the function light's gone off, so we have to make sure that we go back into it. Otherwise we'll press the wrong buttons and do the wrong thing and it'll get annoying. But now we are looking at partial number 1. It's a very, very quiet sound, and we're changing its cutoff, but because it's so quiet, it's not affecting the overall sound of these other partials. Let's choose a more dominant sound. This second partial was much more dominant in this mix. So we'll go to partial number 2. It is changing it. We can multi-select partials the same ways that we can multi-select parts. So let's select the 2 loudest partials. There you go. And now we're only hearing the noise, which is partials 1 and 3. So make note, we can multi-select. So what you're seeing here, it can't be showing us partial 2 plus 3. It's just showing us the page for partial 2, but we are affecting partials 2 and 4. So actually, the lights lit are telling us what is actually being affected, even though earlier it wasn't, because we weren't on one of the partial edit pages. It's such a source of confusion to know what these controls are doing. It really is. It's something you can learn. You have to sort of like get used to it. You have to understand exactly what you're doing. It's not, it's not beyond the wit of man, and it's a fantastically feature-rich synth engine inside this synth. But you've got to go through that major learning curve, and you've got to sort of like feel that it's worth it at the end of the day. So, conclusions, I guess, and I guess that question I just asked in that last segment maybe is the key to this. There is some complexity. There's certainly a learning curve getting into this synthesizer, and is it really worth it? I have to say, for me, very personally, having used this synth for the last few weeks, that I think it absolutely is. The quality of the sounds that you can get out of it are really, really nice. The virtual analog side of things, you know, with traditional waveforms, the filters sound really, really good. You get some really nice, beautiful sort of virtual analog sounds out of the synth. And then you've got all of these samples, thousands of them. They're really, some of them are really good quality. And, you know, you can blend them together and get some really quite impressive results out of them. I really think that the sound of this synthesizer is, you know, is enough for me to say, yes, the learning curve is worth it. Are there any negatives I can say? Any downsides? Just checking my list here. Yes. The first thing is storage. Now, it just seems to me just so incredible that synth manufacturers, they come up with a really good product and then they cripple it in terms of lack of storage. It's just time and time again I'm saying it, not just with this Roland keyboard, but with others. You've only got 256 slots to save your scenes in. And if you think about it, the scene is the one patch you're going to create and want to save. And you can only save 256 of them. It's just criminal. I don't know what Roland were thinking. Why have they given us 256 slots? And it's the same with the tones themselves. They give us thousands of really good factory tones, but we only have 256 slots to save our own user tones in. Again, doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, how much memory does it take just to save those parameters that make up a tone? It just doesn't make any sense. I just don't know why they did it. It's kind of crippled in that respect. Can I use that term? It's not particularly politically correct, but it is quite a bad and unfortunate thing. Storage. What else don't I like about this synthesizer? I haven't actually got on very well with the mini keys. Now, I'm not a keyboard snob or anything like that. I'm happy with any keyboard, light action, heavy action. I don't care. I just get on with it. And I've got quite a few synths that do have mini keys. This particular mini key keyboard, I'm having difficulty getting used to it. And I'm having difficulty getting used to the velocity. What I'm finding, certainly with the black keys more than the white keys, is that I am just sort of like not getting the weight right. And sometimes I'm playing chords. I think I'm playing chords quite normally, but I'm not hitting the keys hard enough. And I'm not hearing the sound. Now, they've got quite a few sort of configuration options inside the synth for controlling the velocity sensitivity. There's an overall sensitivity control, and then you can choose, I think it's either 5 or 6 different velocity curves. So they've given you quite a lot of options there, but I'm still, I haven't got it right yet. Now, the keyboard itself is pretty much identical in size to the Minilog XD. Certainly in terms of width, it's the same, but it is a little bit shorter. And I think that makes a difference with the black keys because, you know, if you're playing black and white notes, your hand, I'm showing you this, your hand's naturally going to go like that. And then you've got fingers playing black notes really quite close to their end point. And of course, you don't have much travel on the black keys, and so trying to get some sort of sensitivity here is just not going to work. You know, what you need to do if this keyboard is something that you're going to use a lot is sort of adapt your approach and sort of like curl your knuckles up a bit and play it a bit more like that. I just find that difficult to adapt to because I have so many other keyboards that I play, and this isn't this sort of like the main keyboard that I play all the time. So I'm finding it difficult, the mini keys. Having said that, I'm happy that there are mini keys on this synth, and a lot of people don't like them, and a lot of people are saying, well, why didn't they create a desktop module? Maybe they could in the future come up with a desktop module. I like the fact it's portable. You can stick 8 AA batteries in the back of it. I think that they lasted me about less than 3 hours of play, but it wasn't continuous play. So, you know, they're not going to last for forever, but it's a nice option to have. I like the fact it's portable. I like the fact it's got mini keys because when it comes to creating scenes, creating patches, I can sit with this anywhere. I can take it out in the garden with some headphones on. It's got speakers in it if you want those, you know, but I'm lying on the sofa in front of the TV with headphones on, creating presets, you know, sit up in bed playing it with headphones on. You can take it around, you know, and take it away from your studio, and still it's nice to have a keyboard to play when you are creating patches. So I like the fact that it's portable, and I like the fact that it's got a keyboard, even though it's not the best keyboard I've played. What else don't I like on my negatives list? Well, this is just a bit of a niggle, but one of the sort of like the advertising points of the synthesizer is the precision of the controls, the resolution. There's 1,024 values for each of these values, whereas a lot of synths only have 128. So you've got this amazing precision. Yes, you do have amazing precision, but not when you use the potentiometers. If you were to do a filter sweep using this encoder, then you can step through the values one at a time. But when you do a filter sweep using the potentiometers, it actually skips 4 values every time as you turn it. You can't get that perfect precision. So if you want to do a filter sweep, you've actually got 256 stepped values with the potentiometers, whereas you've got 1,024 with this rotary encoder. And I just think that's just a bit of a shame that the truth isn't out there. It's not quite exactly what they say. They're kind of giving you the impression that you're going to be able to do all these analog kind of sort of like sweeps in real time, and you can't. Not unless you use this, which I don't like using. Anything else I can say negative-wise? The menu. That's the last thing I'll mention. We've sort of like talked a bit about the user interface and how complicated it is. With sort of like multi-mode buttons, etc. The menus, just the menus themselves, you know, if you look at the menus and you scroll down through them, I don't think they're particularly well organized. They look a bit confusing, and the sort of the abbreviations and the really difficult to understand menu items that you can find in there, where you have to sort of like look them up. I mean, they have provided a separate manual purely for parameters. And you know, I have it on my screen as a PDF, and it's like my sort of like my reference guide as I'm going through the menus to try and understand what half these menu items are. They're just not obvious to me. You know, I think it would really help if like half the screen could be sort of like sort of dedicated to be like a little help bubble, if you like. I'll just have a little sentence in there describing what the parameter is that you're on. That would be really handy. But I just think the menus were designed by a really geeky programmer and not by someone who had any idea how to make a menu that was easy to understand and navigate. I think they really need to sort of like look again at the sort of the usability. Just sort of like having a clean menu system, an easy to understand menu system, would make such a big impact on the usability of the synthesizer. But there we go. What can I say? I mean, in terms of who this synth sort of like was really designed for, I think Roland really have cast their net very wide indeed with it. You know, it's got factory presets by the ton, so you can just use it as a rompler. But it's got a really powerful synth engine inside it if you dare to roll up your sleeves and get into it. And you can get into it all through the menu system if you really, really want to. So, you know, it's there for professionals and serious enthusiasts. It's also there for the casual keyboardist. This arpeggio thing, I'm just going to play you now just one of the factory patches and what it sounds like. Yeah, and what does that tell you? That is iArpeggio coming up with the notes for you. Thanks, iArpeggio. That really was helpful. This is something I will never ever touch, I have to tell you. Yeah, I mean, I think they've cast their net wide. It's for home keyboardists, it's for real enthusiasts, it's for recording artists and producers and professionals alike. And it is portable, so like this guy in the advert, the guy that gets on the bus, you can play it on a bus, you can stick some batteries in it. Yeah, it's got speakers in it, but then again, it's got, you know, phone socket on the front as well as on the back. It's got these XLRs, it's got balanced outputs, it's got some real professional features, as well as being something that you know, a casual keyboard player might like to use. It just covers all the bases. That might be the downside of this synth, to be honest with you, because if you spread it too wide, then you're not really targeting any particular demographic. And I think that's certainly why I discounted it and wasn't interested in it at the beginning. I've had to really take a second look at it. And I really hope that this video might help you to take a second look at it if you have already sort of discounted it as something you're not interested in. It is a powerful digital synthesizer. There's no, there's no two ways about it. Whether it's for you or not, that's entirely up to you. But I'm very grateful that I ended up buying it. Yes, it's expensive, but I think in terms of what you actually get inside here, I actually personally think that it's worth it. So that's it. That's my conclusion at the end of this video. It's been a long one. I'm sorry for that, but I really do hope that it has been useful to you in some way. Until the next one, thank you very, very much for watching.